going to fight, harder than ever, because now I knew she would stop at nothing to see me fall, and if that was the game she wanted to play, then I was ready. Whatever it took, I would find a way to win. I always thought I had a good handle on things. My name is Adam, a 45-year-old software engineer, and I've spent most of my adult life in a steady routine. My wife, Gloria, and I have been married for over 15 years, and we've built a comfortable life together. I work for a tech company that specializes in cybersecurity, and she's a corporate attorney for a mid-sized firm downtown. Our life together was orderly, predictable, and for the most part seemed solid, or at least I wanted to believe it was. But there were signs, little things really, small, almost unnoticeable changes in Gloria's behavior that seemed odd. She had always been the type to meticulously plan everything, from our weekly grocery shopping down to her workouts. But recently, she started coming home late, without the usual explanations. A client meeting ran long, she'd say, or I got caught up in paperwork. Her excuses were plausible, but the frequency of these late nights seemed off. Her mood, too, had changed. She was more distant, less interested in the mundane details of our life that she used to obsess over. She even started going to the gym more frequently, taking on new routines that kept her out for hours. I wasn't sure if I was imagining things or if something was genuinely wrong. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just the usual drift that happens in any long-term relationship. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention to her, or maybe the pressures of our respective careers had created some sort of rift. But then there was the phone. She became oddly protective of it, never leaving it lying around as she used to. It was always in her hand or tucked away in her purse, and I noticed her smiling more at the screen, typing furiously with a secretive smile that used to be reserved for me. One night I casually asked her what was so amusing on her phone. She laughed it off, calling me paranoid. "You're acting like a jealous teenager," she said, brushing past me. I chuckled along with her, but my stomach tightened. Then, there was the new lingerie I found in the back of her closet while looking for my missing belt. A lacy black set, way too sexy for her usual taste. Gloria had always favored practicality over allure, but this was different, daring even. When I asked her about it, she shrugged it off, claiming it was a gift from a friend, but I wasn't sure. I decided to let it go, hoping I was wrong. But the doubt crept in, like a slow poison. Our interactions began to feel like they were wrapped in cotton, muffled and distant. I'd try to bring up a conversation, something lighthearted or mundane, and her responses were always delayed, like she had to force herself to care. Her attention was elsewhere, her mind clearly occupied with something beyond the walls of our home. One Saturday morning, I found myself alone at the breakfast table, sipping coffee and staring at the empty chair where Gloria usually sat. She had left early for yoga, though she had never been much of a morning person. I watched the clock tick away, feeling a knot in my stomach. Her gym bag was missing, and so was the car. I got up and wandered around the house, trying to shake the uneasy feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow. I went to our home office and pulled open the drawer where she kept all her important documents. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe some clue, some sign. My fingers brushed against an unfamiliar piece of paper, a receipt for dinner at an upscale restaurant across town, dated 2 nights ago. I hadn't been there, and I couldn't recall Gloria mentioning any dinner plans. My heart pounded in my chest. What was she doing at this fancy restaurant without me? Who was she with? I put the receipt back and closed the drawer, trying to push the thoughts away, but they were stubborn. Over the next few days, my paranoia grew. I started watching her more closely, trying to decipher every little movement, every glance, every sigh. I even caught myself checking the mileage on the car and looking through her social media accounts late at night, searching for anything that might give me a hint. But there was nothing. Gloria was a lawyer, after all. If she was hiding something, she was doing it well. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Wednesday night. and I was exhausted. Work had been brutal, with back-to-back meetings and the endless churn of deadlines. Gloria was, unsurprisingly, out again. She had sent a quick text earlier, saying she was meeting a client for dinner. I stared at my phone for a long minute, rereading the message, trying to convince myself it was just business as usual. But the words felt hollow, and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at me. I decided to grab a drink at a nearby bar, hoping a change of scenery might clear my head. I sat at the bar nursing a whiskey, my mind running over the past few weeks, trying to piece together the puzzle that was becoming our marriage. I was halfway through my second glass when I saw her. Gloria, my wife. Walking into the same bar, looking stunning in a tight black dress that hugged her curves in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was loose, falling in waves around her shoulders, and she wore heels that I didn't even know she owned. I felt my breath catch in my throat. But she wasn't alone. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with slicked back hair and a sharp suit, walked beside her. He had an air of confidence that was palpable even from a distance. I recognized him. His name was Brad, one of her clients. I had met him once or twice at some corporate events. He was wealthy, the kind of man who wore his money like a second skin, comfortable in his affluence. I watched them take a table in the corner, away from the crowd. She was laughing, her hand casually resting on his arm, her body language open, inviting. She was glowing, in a way I hadn't seen in years. I felt my stomach turn to ice. What the hell was going on? I sat there, rooted to my seat, unable to move, unable to look away. They ordered drinks, and I watched as Gloria leaned in closer to Brad, her smile bright and flirtatious. I could feel my hands clenching into fists, my nails digging into my palms, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt numb, a cold fury building in my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I glanced down to see a text from Gloria. "Sorry, babe. Meeting ran long. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. I turned my eyes back to them, watching as she touched his hand across the table, a gesture far too intimate for a client meeting. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but my mind was racing. I could have stormed over there, made a scene, but instead, I watched. I wanted to know how far she would go, what lines she would cross. And then it happened. Brad leaned in, his lips moving close to her ear, whispering something that made her laugh. A light, carefree sound that cut through the noise of the bar. She tilted her head, and before I knew it, their lips met. A kiss. Slow, deliberate, and unmistakable. My world shattered. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had trusted, crumbled in that single moment. I felt my breath catch, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it over the music. I stood up, knocking my chair back with a loud thud. Heads turned, but I didn't care. I just needed air. I needed to get out of there before I did something I'd regret. I walked out into the cool night, my hands shaking, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this? I felt the sting of tears, but I blinked them back, anger flaring up inside me. I had to know more. I couldn't confront her without proof. I needed to be sure. I went back to my car, my heart still racing, and decided to follow them. I knew it was crazy, but I needed answers. I needed to see how far this had gone, and so I waited. I watched as they left the bar, Gloria still clinging to his arm, her head resting on his shoulder. They walked to his car, and I followed them, staying a safe distance behind. My mind was screaming at me to turn back, to stop this madness, but I couldn't. I needed to know. They drove for a while, and I kept my distance. I felt a sick sense of anticipation building in my gut, the reality of what I might find creeping into my mind. Finally, they pulled into the parking lot of a high-end hotel. I watched as they got out, laughing, holding hands like a pair of teenagers sneaking away for a forbidden night. I knew then, in that moment, that my suspicions were true. She was cheating on me. My wife, the woman I had loved for over 15 years, was having an affair. My world went dark. My jaw clenched, and I felt a wave of fury wash over me. I could hardly breathe, my chest tightening with every step they took towards the hotel entrance. I sat there in my car, paralyzed, torn between the urge to run in and drag her out of there and the cold, logical part of me that needed a plan. I knew there was no going back from this. Everything was about to change. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car outside that damned hotel, watching as the hours ticked by, the neon lights flickering above the entrance. I kept replaying the kiss over and over in my head, each replay cutting deeper than the last. I wanted to charge into that hotel, drag her out, and demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere, not yet. I needed to be smart. I needed proof. When I finally drove home, it was almost dawn. The house was dark and quiet, the way it always was when she was working late. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space beside me. The smell of her perfume lingered in the sheets, a sharp floral scent that now felt like a mocking reminder of what she had become. I picked up my phone and opened the GPS tracker app I had installed on her car months ago, back when the late nights first started. I hadn't even been sure why I did it back then. A gut feeling, maybe. Some subconscious need to protect myself from a truth I wasn't ready to face. But now, it felt like the smartest move I'd ever made. I watched as the little red dot marked her location at the hotel. Still there. My stomach churned at the thought of what was happening behind those walls. I felt sick, disgusted with myself for even imagining it. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed confirmation. A few hours later, I heard her car pulling up the driveway. I stayed in bed, pretending to be asleep. She tiptoed into the room as if she could sneak past the guilt that clung to her. I could hear the soft rustling of her clothes as she undressed, then the faint scent of that same perfume as she slipped into bed beside me. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling her body next to mine. I wanted to turn around, to look her in the eyes and ask, "How could you?" But I didn't. I stayed still, pretending to sleep, feeling her warm breath on my back. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. The next few days, I kept up appearances. I went to work, went through the motions, even managed to force a few smiles. But inside, I was a storm brewing, every minute bringing me closer to the edge. I began to keep a closer eye on her. Casual questions about her day, where she was going, who she was meeting. Her answers were smooth, practiced, but I knew better now. And then came the day I had been waiting for. I was sitting in my home office, pretending to work, when I heard her on the phone in the living room. Her voice was low, hushed, but I caught enough to know who she was talking to. Brad. She was telling him how she couldn't wait to see him again, how last night was amazing. My blood boiled at her words, each one a dagger driven deeper into my heart. I quietly walked closer, just enough to hear her say, "No, he has no idea. I'm sure of it." I clenched my fists, anger seething through every pore of my body. She finished the call, and I slipped back into the office, my mind racing. I knew then that it was time. That evening I acted normal. I cooked dinner, made small talk, even poured us both a glass of wine. She seemed relaxed, even happy, as if she had no idea that her whole world was about to come crashing down. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of cutlery against the plates. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I put down my fork and looked at her. "So, how was your day?" I asked, my voice steady, casual. She glanced up, smiling. "Oh, just another busy day at the office," she replied, sipping her wine. "How about you?" I nodded slowly, feeling the tension building in my chest. Fine, just... it's funny," I said, leaning back in my chair. I bumped into someone today who said they saw you at a hotel last night. Fancy place. The Magnolia Suites, I think it was. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. The flicker of panic in her eyes. "Oh?" she said, trying to sound casual. "That's strange." I wasn't at any hotel. I watched her closely, my heart racing. "Are you sure?" I asked, pushing a little harder. "Because they seemed pretty certain it was you. Said you were with some guy." She laughed, but it was forced, too quick. "That's ridiculous, Adam. I was with a client last night, you know that." I leaned in closer, my eyes locking onto hers. "Gloria," I said, my voice low, "I know you're lying." Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I felt a surge of satisfaction, seeing her caught like this, her perfect little world starting to crumble. "I followed you," I continued. "I saw you with Brad. I know you spent the night with him." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might deny it, try to spin some new web of lies. But then, to my surprise, she laughed. A cold, hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "Well, congratulations," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You finally figured it out, so now we're even." My jaw dropped, stunned by her response. "Even?" I asked, unable to find the words. "What do you mean by even?" She rolled her eyes, like I was some idiot who just couldn't keep up. "Well, you cheated on me," she snapped. "So I did the same thing, you fool. Yesterday I saw you with a blonde in a cafe. I didn't know what to say since I wasn't with any blondes in a cafe." My mind went blank for a moment, trying to process what she had just said. A blonde? I hadn't been with anyone. Was this her way of justifying what she had done? And then, just like that, everything started to make sense. The suspicion, the paranoia, the bizarre need to catch me in something I hadn't done. She was projecting her guilt onto me, using it as her twisted excuse. I felt a cold smile forming on my lips. "Gloria," I said quietly, "I have never cheated on you. Not once. But you just showed me exactly who you are." Her face twisted into a mask of anger and frustration. "You're lying!" she shouted, standing up, knocking her chair back. "You were with that woman. I saw you." I shook my head slowly, standing up to face her. "No, Gloria," I replied, my voice steady. "I think you're the one who's been caught." And with that, the thin veneer of our marriage shattered completely. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood there staring at her, feeling the weight of every betrayal, every lie pressing down on my shoulders. Gloria's face was a mix of anger and disbelief, her eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt. She wanted to find something, anything, to latch onto, to twist and manipulate into another one of her excuses. But there was nothing left for her to use. I could see her brain working, scrambling for a way out, but the truth hung in the air like a fog, thick and inescapable. "You're really going to play the innocent card?" she sneered, folding her arms across her chest. "You expect me to believe that you never once stepped out? That blonde at the cafe, who was she?" I shook my head slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "There was no blonde, Gloria. I haven't been with anyone else. I don't know who you think you saw, but it wasn't me." She scoffed, rolling her eyes again. "You're such a liar, Adam. I saw you with my own eyes. Don't try to make me look like the crazy one." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "You're not crazy, Gloria," I said quietly. "You're just desperate. Desperate to find any reason to justify what you've done. But this isn't about me. It's about you and the choices you've made." Her face flushed red, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Don't you dare turn this around on me," she hissed. "You've been neglecting me for years, always working late, always too tired or too busy to care. What was I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for you to notice me? I felt a sharp pang of guilt, but I pushed it down, refusing to let her manipulate me any longer. I never stopped caring, I replied, my voice firm. I never stopped loving you, but it looks like that wasn't enough for you. She laughed again, a bitter, humorless sound. Love? You call this love? We've been living like strangers for years, Adam. You're blind if you think this marriage was ever working. I wanted to argue, to point out all the times I'd tried to make things right, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Gloria had made up her mind a long time ago, and nothing I said would change that. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Maybe you're right, I said finally, feeling a strange sense of relief as the words left my mouth. Maybe our marriage hasn't been working, but that doesn't justify what you did. It doesn't give you a free pass to cheat and lie. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. And don't think for a second that this is over, I continued, my voice rising with anger. Because it's not. You don't get to walk away from this without consequences. I'm going to make sure of that. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked, her voice suddenly small, uncertain. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. I mean that I know more than you think, I said. I know about the money you've been moving around, the secret accounts. I know about all of it, and I'm not going to let you take a single penny from me. Her face went pale, and I could see the panic starting to set in. She hadn't expected this. She thought she was in control, that she could manipulate me into some twisted version of the truth where she was the victim. But she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her win. She backed away, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. You have no right, she stammered. I'm entitled to half of everything. I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that filled the room. Not if I prove you've been stealing from me, I said. Not if I show the court all the evidence I've been gathering. Her face twisted with rage, her hands balled into fists at her sides. You bastard, she spat. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've got it all figured out? I took a step closer, looking her straight in the eyes. No, Gloria, I said softly. I just know who you really are now, and I'm not going to let you ruin me. She stared at me for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out her next move. But for the first time, she looked uncertain, unsure of herself. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, listening to the sound of her footsteps fading away, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what she was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I had just declared war, and I wasn't backing down. The days that followed were a blur. Gloria retreated into herself, avoiding me as much as possible. She spent most of her time locked away in the guest room, on the phone with God knows who, or tapping furiously on her laptop. Every so often, she'd emerge to grab a coffee or a glass of wine, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I kept my distance, watching her from the periphery, waiting to see what she'd do next. At night, I could hear her pacing the floors, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, reminding me that she was still there, still plotting. I knew she was desperate, and desperation made people dangerous. I couldn't trust a single word she said, a single move she made. I tried to carry on with my life as if everything was normal, but the truth was, everything had changed. The reality of her betrayal settled into me like a stone, heavy and cold. I found myself watching her, studying her every move, trying to anticipate what she'd do next. I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. She had too much pride for that. I started preparing myself for what was to come. I contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation, laying out everything I knew, everything I'd seen. He listened quietly, taking notes, his expression grave. It's not going to be easy, he said finally. She's a lawyer herself, and a good one by the sounds of it. She's going to come after you with everything she's got." "I know," I replied, "but I'm ready for it. I have to be." I spent hours going through our financial records, combing through every transaction, every statement, looking for the inconsistencies I knew were there. Gloria had been careful, but not careful enough. I found the discrepancies, the hidden transfers, the secret accounts she thought I'd never find. I documented everything, building a case, preparing for the inevitable showdown. But Gloria was not idle either. She had plans of her own. I started noticing her making calls, hushed conversations late at night, her voice low and urgent. I knew she was rallying her defenses, calling in favors, doing everything she could to protect herself. The tension in the house was palpable, like a powder keg waiting to explode. And then, the unexpected happened. One evening, I came home from work to find Gloria sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and puffy, a half-empty bottle of wine in front of her. I had never seen her like this, so vulnerable, so small. For a moment I felt a pang of sympathy, a flicker of the love I had once felt for her. But then I remembered everything she'd done, the lies, the betrayal, and my resolve hardened. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of anger and despair. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms over my chest. "About what?" I asked coolly. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't want to do this, Adam. I don't want to fight." I raised an eyebrow. "You should have thought about that before you slept with another man." She flinched, her eyes narrowing. "You don't understand," she snapped. "You've never understood. I've been unhappy for years. I needed something. Someone." I felt a surge of anger, my fists clenching at my sides. "So, what? You just decided to throw everything away because you were bored? Because you needed a thrill?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, it wasn't like that. I don't know. I felt lost. And Brad, he was there. He made me feel wanted." I laughed bitterly. "And now? What does he make you feel now?" She wiped her eyes, her hand trembling. "I don't know. I don't even know if it matters anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. "Why are you telling me this, Gloria? What do you want?" She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "I want to settle this," she said finally. "I don't want to drag it out. Let's just divide everything and move on. Clean break." I studied her for a moment, trying to read her intentions. It sounded too easy, too simple. I knew Gloria better than that. She was trying to get ahead of me, to control the narrative before I could take action. She wanted to settle on her terms, terms that would leave her with more than she deserved. "I'm not interested in a clean break," I said firmly. "Not until I know exactly what you've been up to. All of it. Every lie, every secret. I want the truth, Gloria, and I'm not backing down until I get it." Her face twisted with frustration. "Why can't you just let it go?" she pleaded. "Why can't we both just walk away?" "Because you don't deserve it," I replied, my voice cold. "Because you've been lying to me for God knows how long, and you think you can just walk away with half of everything I worked for? That's not happening." She slammed her hand on the table, making the wine glass rattle. "Fine," she shouted, standing up. "Have it your way, but don't think for a second I'm going to make this easy for you." I watched as she stormed out of the kitchen, her footsteps echoing through the house. I knew I had just pushed her into a corner, and she was going to fight back harder than ever. But I was ready. I was done being the fool. I had been blindsided once, but it wasn't going to happen again. I had a war to win, and I was prepared to do whatever it took. The next morning, Gloria was gone before I woke up. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in her neat, precise handwriting. "Out early, meeting with my lawyer. You should do the same." I crumpled the paper in my hand, feeling a fresh wave of anger surge through me. She was going on the offensive, and she wasn't wasting any time. I had expected this move, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. I spent the day preparing for what I knew would be a brutal fight. I met with my lawyer, Tom, a no-nonsense type who had seen his fair share of messy divorces. I laid everything out for him: Gloria's affair, the secret accounts, the money she had been siphoning off. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, his eyes sharp and calculating. "She's not going to play nice," I said, leaning back in my chair. "She's going to come at me with everything she has." Tom nodded, tapping his pen against the notepad. "I figured as much," he replied. "But you've got a solid case here, Adam. If we can prove the infidelity, the hidden assets, we've got a good shot at minimizing her claims. We just need to gather all the evidence and build our strategy." I felt a flicker of hope at his words, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of what was ahead. "How long do you think this will take?" I asked. He sighed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Could be months, maybe longer. It all depends on how hard she pushes back. But from what you've told me, she's going to drag this out. She's not going to give up easily." I nodded, steeling myself for the long road ahead. "Then we'll do what we have to," I said firmly. "I'm not letting her walk away with everything I've built." Over the next few weeks, the battle lines were drawn. Gloria and I barely spoke, except through our lawyers. The house felt like a war zone, every room a minefield of tension and resentment. She began moving things out little by little: boxes of clothes, books, personal items. She was preparing for the end, and so was I. One night, I was in the kitchen sifting through the mail when I came across an envelope addressed to me from a private investigator. My heart raced as I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside, I found a series of photos: Gloria and Brad together at various locations, the bar, the hotel, even at his office. Each one was time-stamped, marked with clear evidence of their affair. I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. Here it was, the proof I needed. The pictures were damning, undeniable. I quickly scanned the rest of the documents, noting the detailed reports, the receipts, the dates. Everything was there, laid out in black and white. I called Tom immediately. "I've got the evidence," I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Photos, documents, everything we need to prove the affair." "That's great," he replied. "Get those over to me as soon as you can. This will give us a huge advantage." I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of confidence for the first time in weeks. I knew this wasn't over, but at least now I had the upper hand. That evening, I decided to confront Gloria. I found her in the living room, typing furiously on her laptop. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone cold. I tossed the photos onto the coffee table in front of her. "These," I said simply. She glanced down at the photos, and for a split second I saw a flash of panic in her eyes. But she quickly composed herself, her expression turning to one of defiance. "So, you've been spying on me now?" she sneered. "How classy." "I needed proof," I replied evenly. "Proof that you've been lying, cheating, and stealing from me." She rolled her eyes. "This changes nothing," she said. "If you think this will scare me, you're wrong. I'm still entitled to half, and I'm not backing down." I took a step closer, my voice low and steady. "You're entitled to nothing, Gloria. You broke our vows, you betrayed me, and you've been siphoning off our money. You think a judge is going to look favorably on that?" She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You self-righteous bastard," she spat. "You think you can control everything, don't you? You think you can just win by playing the victim? Well, guess what, Adam? I'm not the only one with secrets." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. She smirked, her eyes gleaming with a cold satisfaction. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough," she said, grabbing her laptop and storming out of the room. I stood there, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't know what she meant, what she was planning, but I knew it wasn't good. Gloria had always been cunning, always one step ahead, and now she was hinting at something I wasn't prepared for. The next day, I got a call from Tom. His voice was tense, almost nervous. "Adam, we've got a problem," he said. "What is it?" I asked, feeling my heart rate spike. "She's claiming that you've been abusive," he replied. "Emotionally, verbally, even physically. She's saying you've been controlling her, monitoring her, and she's filed a restraining order." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "That's a lie," I shouted. "She's making this up." "I know," Tom said calmly, "but we need to handle this carefully. This could get ugly, Adam. Real ugly." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Gloria had just escalated the war to a whole new level, and I was caught completely off guard. She was playing dirty, and now I had to brace myself for whatever was coming next. I realized then that this wasn't just a battle for assets or money. It was a fight for my very reputation, my very future. And Gloria was prepared to burn everything down to win. The next few days felt like a living nightmare. Gloria's accusations spread like wildfire. She filed a complaint with my company, alleging that I had been harassing her both at home and through her work. I was called into a meeting with HR, where I was grilled about my behavior, my conduct, my character. The questions were sharp, probing, as if they already believed every word she had said. I tried to keep my composure, to answer calmly, but the whole situation was surreal. I'd never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice beyond what anyone might do in an argument. But here I was, defending myself against a mountain of lies, while she painted herself as the victim of a cruel, controlling husband. The worst part was seeing the doubt in people's eyes, colleagues I'd worked with for years, people who knew me. They looked at me with suspicion, as if they were trying to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the monster Gloria was describing. I could feel the foundations of my life cracking beneath me, everything I'd built slowly crumbling. Tom was working tirelessly, but even he seemed unnerved by the turn things had taken. "We need to counter this aggressively," he told me one evening over the phone. "File a response denying every single claim. We'll need character witnesses, documentation, anything that shows this is a fabrication." I agreed, but inside, I was terrified. I knew Gloria had always been capable of manipulation, but this was a new level. She was willing to destroy my entire life to get what she wanted. I began to wonder just how far she would go. A few days later, a court date was set for the hearing regarding the restraining order. I arrived at the courthouse early, my mind buzzing with nerves. Gloria was already there, dressed in a conservative black dress, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked the part of a wronged woman, an innocent victim. Her lawyer, a slick-looking guy with a smug grin, stood by her side. I felt a surge of anger as I watched her. How could she lie so easily? How could she stand there and pretend to be the victim when she was the one who had torn our life apart? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I needed to stay focused, to stay calm. The hearing began, and Gloria's lawyer wasted no time painting a picture of a controlling, abusive husband who had made her life hell. He listed off her evidence, text messages taken out of context, isolated incidents twisted into something sinister. I watched in disbelief as Gloria played her part perfectly, her voice trembling with emotion, her eyes glistening with what looked like real tears. When it was my turn to speak, I felt the weight of the room's eyes on me, the pressure mounting. I explained my side, laid out the facts, pointed out the inconsistencies in her story. I provided my own evidence, the photos of her with Brad, the bank statements showing her secret accounts. I tried to show the court the real Gloria, the manipulator, the liar. But as I spoke, I could see the judge's expression remain stoic, unreadable. I could feel the doubt hanging in the air, thick and heavy. Gloria had gotten to them, had spun her web of deceit so skillfully that even the truth seemed like another version of the story. When it was over, the judge announced that the restraining order would be granted on a temporary basis until a full investigation could be conducted. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stood there, stunned, as Gloria flashed a victorious smile. She had won this round, and she knew it. Outside the courthouse, I paced back and forth, trying to calm myself, trying to think. Gloria emerged a few moments later, her lawyer by her side. She walked up to me, her expression cold and triumphant. "Told you," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "I'm not going to make this easy for you." I clenched my fists, biting back the urge to shout, to scream at her. "Why, Gloria?" I asked, my voice raw. "Why are you doing this?" She tilted her head slightly, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Because I can," she whispered. "Because I'm not going to let you win." With that, she turned and walked away, her lawyer trailing behind her. I watched her go, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved become this enemy? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I needed a new plan, a way to fight back. Gloria had gone nuclear, and I had to be ready to do the same. But what could I do? She had already poisoned everyone against me, already dragged my name through the mud. And then it hit me. I realized I had been too focused on playing defense, on proving my innocence. But I needed to go on the offense, to show everyone exactly who Gloria was and what she was capable of. I needed someone who knew her better than anyone, someone who could testify to her true nature, and I knew exactly who to call. The next morning, I reached out to Brad. I hadn't spoken to him since I caught them together, but I knew he had ended things with Gloria shortly after. I dialed his number, my heart pounding. The phone rang, once, twice, and then he answered. "Adam?" His voice was surprised, cautious. "Brad, I need your help," I said, diving straight in. "Gloria is trying to destroy me. She's dragging me through court with lies, trying to ruin my life. I know you ended things with her. I need you to testify against her." There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Finally, he spoke. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll help you. But we do this my way." I agreed, feeling a spark of hope igniting in my chest. Brad knew her games, her tricks. He had been on the inside, had seen her true face. With him on my side, I might just have a chance. But I also knew that by bringing him into this, I was setting the stage for a final confrontation, one that would either save me or destroy us both. The days leading up to the next court date were filled with tension, anxiety, and planning. Brad and I met in a quiet, dimly lit bar on the edge of town. It felt strange to sit across from the man who had been my wife's lover, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I needed him now, and I needed him on my side. Brad was surprisingly calm, almost disarmingly so. He leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink with a relaxed air that seemed completely out of place given the circumstances. "So," he began, his eyes fixed on mine, "you want to bring Gloria down. You want the truth out there." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "She's trying to ruin my life with these lies. I need to expose her for what she is, and you're the only one who can help me do that." Brad nodded slowly, setting his glass down. "I'm in," he said. "But like I told you before, we do this my way. Gloria knows how to play dirty, and if you want to beat her, you've got to be willing to get your hands dirty too." I hesitated for a moment, weighing his words. I had always prided myself on doing things the right way, on taking the high road. But I realized now that the high road wasn't going to save me. Gloria had shown me that much. "All right," I said finally. "What do you have in mind?" Brad leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I know things about Gloria, he began. Things she doesn't want anyone to know. Her history, her secrets. She's not as clean as she pretends to be. There are skeletons in her closet, Adam, and if we can pull them out, she'll have no choice but to back down. I felt a surge of hope mixed with apprehension. Like what? I asked. What kind of skeletons? Brad smirked. For starters, there's the fraud she committed a few years back. She told you it was just a misunderstanding with a client, right? Well, it was more than that. She embezzled a significant amount of money from a former employer, but she managed to cover it up with a clever legal maneuver and some payouts. I know because she told me everything back when we were involved. My eyes widened. Are you serious? Brad nodded. Serious as a heart attack. And there's more. Gloria's been using her position as an attorney to pull some pretty shady deals. She's gotten away with it so far, but if this stuff comes to light, she could lose her license, and a lot more. I felt a thrill of excitement. Do you have proof? He smiled. Not yet, but I know where to find it. Gloria isn't as careful as she thinks. She has a habit of keeping records, emails, documents, just in case she needs leverage later. She's paranoid like that. I've been in her office enough times to know where she keeps her insurance files. I leaned in closer, feeling my pulse quicken. So, what do we do? Brad took a deep breath. We break in, he said simply. We get those files, make copies, and use them to expose her. If we can show the court that she's been lying and manipulating, that she's been involved in illegal activities, her credibility will be shot. No judge will believe her after that. My heart raced at the thought. It was risky, dangerous even. But it was also my best shot. Are you sure you know where to look? I asked. He nodded confidently. I know exactly where. We'll go after hours when her office is empty. I have a key card from when I used to meet her there. It should still work. I paused, considering the implications. If we got caught, it could blow up in our faces. But if we didn't do something, Gloria would continue to dismantle my life piece by piece. I looked at Brad, meeting his gaze. Let's do it, I said finally. I'm in. Brad smiled, a glint of determination in his eyes. Good. Meet me tomorrow night at 10. We'll get what we need and get out. The next night, I drove to Gloria's office building with my heart pounding in my chest. The streets were quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Brad was already there, waiting by the side entrance, dressed in dark clothes. He handed me a similar set of clothes and a pair of gloves. Ready? He asked, his voice low. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, pulling on the gloves. He swiped the key card and we slipped inside. The office was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the exit signs. We moved quickly and quietly down the hallway, my nerves on edge with every step. Brad led the way, turning corners with practiced ease until we reached Gloria's office. He paused outside the door, glancing back at me. This is it, he whispered. You keep watch while I look for the files. I nodded, my heart racing. He slipped inside, and I stood by the door, listening for any sound, any hint of movement. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. Finally, Brad reappeared, a folder clutched in his hand. Got it, he said with a grin. Let's go. We retraced our steps, moving quickly toward the exit. My adrenaline was pumping, my senses on high alert. We were almost out when I heard it. A faint rustle, a shadow moving at the end of the hall. I froze, grabbing Brad's arm. Wait! I hissed. We pressed ourselves against the wall, holding our breath. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The shadow moved closer, and I saw a flashlight beam sweep across the hallway. A security guard. We held still, praying he wouldn't see us. After what felt like an eternity, the guard turned and walked the other way, his footsteps fading into the distance. Brad and I exchanged a look, both of us breathing a sigh of relief. We slipped out the side entrance, the cool night air hitting our faces as we made our way to the car. Once we were safely inside, Brad handed me the folder. "Here," he said, "everything you need to bring her down." I opened it, my hands trembling, and saw the documents, the emails, the bank statements, the legal memos. It was all there, the proof I needed. "This is it," I whispered. "This is what we need." Brad nodded, his expression serious. "We need to move fast," he said. "Get this to your lawyer and file it with the court. The sooner we get ahead of this, the better." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Gloria had declared war, but now I had the ammunition to fight back. The game had changed, and I was ready to play it her way. But deep down, I knew there would be consequences. There always were. The courthouse had a way of amplifying tension, every sound echoing off the walls, every footstep heavy with consequence. I sat there, waiting for the hearing to start, my heart pounding in my chest, the folder of evidence in my lap. Brad had come through, we had the ammunition. All I needed now was the right moment to pull the trigger. Gloria arrived shortly after, her face set in a mask of defiance, but I could see the cracks forming around her eyes. Her lawyer, looking slightly less confident than before, trailed behind her. I met her gaze for a moment. There was no trace of the woman I had once loved, only the stranger who had betrayed me so deeply. Brad arrived next, a calm confidence about him as he made his way toward me. He gave a quick nod, his expression steady. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. Ready as I'll ever be. When the hearing began, Gloria's lawyer launched into his usual defense, portraying her as the poor, beleaguered wife trying to escape an abusive marriage. The narrative was well rehearsed, but today it felt hollow. Even the judge seemed unimpressed, his fingers tapping impatiently on the desk. Tom, my lawyer, waited patiently. Then, as if on cue, he rose to present our evidence. "Your Honor," he began, "we have new evidence that not only disproves these allegations but reveals a pattern of fraudulent and unethical behavior by Ms. Walker." He opened the folder, laying out each piece methodically. As he spoke, the mood in the room shifted. The emails, bank records, and proof of her affair with Brad painted a damning picture. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, heads turning, and I could feel the momentum swinging in our favor. Then, the unexpected happened. As we presented the final piece of evidence, a document detailing her past embezzlement, Gloria stood up suddenly, her face flushed. "This is a setup!" she shouted, her voice shaking. "It's all lies! You're trying to ruin me, Adam!" The judge's gavel banged sharply. "Ms. Walker, sit down," he ordered. But she didn't listen. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back into her seat, but she wrenched free. "You think you can just do this to me?" she yelled, pointing at me. "You think I'm going down without a fight?" Her outburst took everyone by surprise, even me. But what came next was something I hadn't anticipated. She turned to the judge, her eyes wild. "I have something to say," she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "You think I'm the bad guy here, but you don't know the half of it. You don't know what he's done." The judge's face darkened. "Ms. Walker, you are out of order." But Gloria ignored him. She spun around, her gaze burning into me. "You think you're so perfect, Adam?" she sneered. "Well, maybe I'm not the only one who's been hiding things." For a moment I was confused, not sure where she was going. But then I saw her pull something from her purse, a flash drive. My stomach sank. "I have evidence," she declared, holding it up for everyone to see. "Evidence that Adam has been hiding money too, that he's been transferring funds into offshore accounts, skimming off the top of our joint assets. He's not as innocent as he pretends to be." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My heart stopped. I had no idea what she was talking about. I hadn't hidden anything. But the way she spoke, the conviction in her voice, sent a chill down my spine. The judge gestured for the bailiff to take the drive. "We'll see about this," he said grimly. This court will review any new evidence presented. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I glanced at Tom, who looked just as shocked as I was. "This is a bluff," he whispered to me, though his face betrayed uncertainty. But Gloria's face was set, her eyes gleaming with a strange satisfaction. She knew she had managed to cast a shadow of doubt, to muddy the waters just enough. She wasn't going down quietly. She was going to take me with her. The judge called for a recess to examine the new evidence. I stepped outside, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. Brad followed, his face tight with worry. "What is this?" he asked. "Do you think she really has something on you?" I shook my head, still trying to process. "I have no idea," I replied. "I've never done anything like that. But she must have something up her sleeve." As I stood there, trying to piece it together, I saw Gloria watching me from across the hall, a sly smile on her lips. She looked like a cat who had cornered its prey, ready to pounce. My mind raced. Was this just another one of her tricks? Or had she found some way to frame me, to drag me into the same pit she was falling into? The judge returned, and we all filed back into the courtroom. His expression was stern as he sat down. "We've reviewed the contents of the flash drive," he began, his voice grave. "And while there is no conclusive proof of Mr. Walker's alleged misconduct, there are several suspicious transactions that warrant further investigation." My heart sank. She had done it. She had managed to turn the tables, at least partially. The judge continued, "As a result, I'm issuing a continuance to allow both parties to present further evidence regarding these new claims." I felt a surge of frustration and disbelief. This was supposed to be my victory, my chance to expose her for what she truly was. But now, Gloria had found a way to drag me deeper into this mess. As the judge adjourned the hearing, I watched Gloria closely. Her smile had faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. She had thrown a wrench into the gears, and now everything was uncertain again. Outside the courtroom, I pulled Brad aside. "What the hell just happened?" I muttered, my voice tight with anger. Brad shook his head. "I don't know, but she's playing a different game now. She's desperate and she's willing to do anything to win. You need to be ready for that." I nodded, feeling a storm of emotions brewing inside me. Gloria had just upped the stakes. She wasn't just trying to take me down financially anymore. She wanted to destroy my reputation, my very identity. I realized then that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt the weight of what was ahead. Gloria had shown her hand, and it was more dangerous than I could have imagined. But I wasn't going to give up. I was